All right, joining us as her usual slot on a Monday is our political, economic, social commentator, Hilary Calvert. She joins us now. Welcome to the show, Hilary. Lovely to have you on again.
Afternoon, Michael.
Listen, we talked, or you want to talk today, and just in preparation for that, about the Stats New Zealand so-called resignation last week after the Manurewa report, which came out, last Tuesday afternoon. But I've also noticed, and just as a precursor to that, there's a new website called The Facts. Have you come across that at all?
No. It's a government thing. It would be interesting.
No, I think it's a private thing, The Facts, but I don't know who's behind it. But all they essentially do is they pick up a series of statistics, everything from media trust to, in this particular case, they've done a review of the result in Tamaki Makaurau at the last election, and then looked at the various polling booths and published those as well. But it highlights that at the Manurewa marae, which was what we're talking about, that Te Pāti Māori's vote was disproportionately excessive in comparison to every other polling booth in that particular Māori seat. And suggests, well, frankly, skullduggery on a grand scale. Nevertheless, the report came out last Tuesday. There were two of them. We talked about it, or I editorialised about it last week. You've got some thoughts, though, on the postscripts to those reports.
Yes, and it's interesting to hear a minister resigning for, in his terms, and who knows exactly what, putting his hand on somebody's arm or something. But
well,
a series
if that's the only thing, yeah, but
slightly inappropriate behaviours and things. And arguably, what we know about the head of Stats New Zealand was that he was trying to, or he achieved, perhaps, doing something to the country which usually would be, 10 years in prison or something if it was one individual person he'd just done it to. As it is, he can, we've already had one Stats New Zealand head disappearing because she wasn't doing a good job.
Incompetent.
And here's him.
On a grand scale.
Yes. And if you look at the list of things that, and this is without any charges or anything like that, that the inquiry last week pointed out, it's hard to imagine in his job he could have made more of a pig's ear of it and done more damage to our political system based on our statistics. And yet, despite common descriptions of what he did as standing down, he did not. And so somehow the media has managed to suggest that he has some, he should get some marks for standing down. And even in today's ODT, it described him as standing down, which is just nonsense. And so if you think, why is the media in a bad way, even when they've got something as egregious as this report, and you have a head of a major department who should have been being more careful and who had been warned by various people that a bad thing was happening or had been happening, it's just almost impossible to see a situation that the mainstream media would have criticised him for, really. All they do is say he stood down like he died on a sword. He did not. The report was delayed until it was close enough to the time when his contract was finishing, 30th of March or whatever it was, that he said, I am feeling virtuous, I will not apply to have my contract renewed. That's extraordinary, both what the media did and the suggestion that somebody who doesn't apply to have a contract renewed, that he has no right to have renewed, could describe that as standing down in any way. It's just extraordinary to me.
I agree with you. He's just, for those who are listening and who haven't caught up with this, but I'm sure you have, his contract was due to finish, actually next week, I think. His 5-year term was to come. There is no guarantee that he'd be reappointed to that position. He hasn't been sacked as a consequence or stood down. He's just decided not to reapply for the position that he wouldn't actually necessarily have got. And given this government's been changing chief executives, good chance he wouldn't have.
So what do you imagine he could have done to actually be either forced to resign or to have been sacked? Is there anything he could have done? He couldn't have stolen money or anything because he didn't have any money under his control. He did about as egregious things with the department that anybody can do.
Well, essentially, the basic charge is that he stats, along with 5 or 6 other, health is another one, just quietly, did not control the privacy of information. So, you contracted out to a group of people who you shouldn't have contracted out in the first place to gather confidential information on behalf of the state. 2, you then oversaw, either through negligence or through neglect, or both, the transfer of that responsibility to a private agency so that they could use it for politicking and for electing a member of parliament at the last election. So you didn't do your job, basically. But he hasn't been held responsible for that, has he?
Yeah, usual processes and safeguards were not done. The high trust model was inappropriate.
Correct.
Fundamental confidentiality protections were not in place.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine what he'd done that could have got him sacked. If these things don't get him sacked, and you would have stood him down immediately last December whenever the report actually hit somebody who knew about it.
Yep.
Why not stand him down then? But
listen, you're absolutely right.
Can you imagine anything he could have done?
Yeah. And the lack of accountability of the public sector, and in this particular case of the highest agencies of the public sector, for the neglect, the negligence, for the unprofessional conduct, the complete undermining of trust in the state. You're right. We used to call, I don't know if you ever did. Sorry, carry on.
He could, as it happens, rely on the media to lie for him, to say.
Yes. What a noble thing you've done.
Yeah.
Listen, the other thing too is
you shouldn't be able to rely on.
I had a case like this when I was mayor. I had a couple actually from senior managers of the then Whanganui District Council. And I discovered as a consequence of that there was a little known, is it a tort called public malfeasance? Have you come across that?
Yes, malfeasance in public office.
Is that the one? Malfeasance in public office. Yeah, I think that's the one. Yes. Yep. And it essentially
sounds rather
means,
grand, doesn't it?
It is grand, but essentially it means that if you are in a position of significant authority and responsibility, and you perform your job so badly that it has egregious effects upon the trust or the professionalism of your agency, you can hold various public officials responsible for their deleterious acts. In this particular case of neglect and negligence, in my particular case, it was a fraud and misrepresentation. But you never see it, do you, either in local or central government?
Well, what would Crackit Central Otago District Council about was that sort of...
Oh, that's right. You were involved in a dispute with them in which they were completely legally wrong and covering up a falsehood and a wrong on their part by the then chief executive. You're absolutely right. I forgot about that one.